Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to talk about kind of what secure testing needs to look like on a global scale and some of the unique challenges that face international medical schools and how we feel like we can be a benefit to people facing those challenges. Don't worry though, if you're not from a international medical school and you're here today, no worries. There's a lot of things that'll be just generally applicable as well, but that is definitely the focus. There's a lot of challenges facing medical schools. The need for expanded feedback on learning outcomes to students is something that's really facing both international and domestic medical schools, and is something that there's been an increased focus on recently, and is something that is not that easy to do if you don't have the right tools. Scrutiny from accreditation bodies has been different than it used to be. It used to be, did you teach something? And are you making sure you're teaching all the things you said you're going to teach? And how long did you spend teaching it? And who taught it? Now we really need to know, did the students learn it? Did the students learn it to the standards that are necessary? And limited resources. Everybody has limited resources, and so kind of going back to my first point of, do you have the tools to do some of these things? Limited resources make it really, really difficult sometimes to get exactly what you need to be able to make some of these processes a little easier, because the best practices aren't always something that are enabled to you by your budgets. There's a new demand, and I shouldn't say new, there's an increased demand for technology integration in education. This demand's been building for probably 8-10 years now. Actually, maybe even going further back than that, when USMLE Step 1 switched over to a computer-based format. But these days, with the electronic medical record and licensure exams going to computer-based, there's more and more need for technology in education and technology integration into education. And curriculum mapping and exam blueprinting. They're two concepts that have been around for a long time, but again, I think as a part of the combination of all the things listed above, there's a new focus on them, and there's a need for tools that help you with that. These challenges are something that every school is facing, but I feel like our international colleagues face this even more so than most. As we've traveled in the last year or two to a lot of different international conferences, what we found is that the tools that are needed for this exist even less when it goes to international markets, and that the schools over there are trying to deal with a lot of different competing needs and interests. There's some different questions you really need to ask as you're starting to dig into these problems, though. And the questions aren't that difficult, but there's something that I think each school needs to find a way to address, and that's, how do you provide better and more comprehensive feedback to students in the curriculum? Different constituencies of people, very different needs, but yet both your curriculum leaders and your students need real, actionable feedback, things that they can actually do something about, that they can take a step with and say, okay, here's where we need to go next. How do we take that information and use it better? How do we take that next step with the students and with the curriculum and say, how do we use that for student intervention? How do we use that for performance improvement? Because once you have the data, you've got the roadmap on how to get there. And then how do we get the benefits of computer-based testing if our infrastructure isn't ready to support it? Again, this is one of the ones I think is much more relevant to some of our international clients and international medical schools in general, but there may not necessarily be quite the technology infrastructure on those campuses that there is here in the States. And there are a lot of benefits to computer-based testing. There are a lot of things with data that you can do and receive and that you need to be able to get feedback, and all these things I've been talking about, and we'll get into what those are. But if your infrastructure isn't there, how can you find a tool that doesn't require a huge infrastructure but still gives you those benefits? And then the last three here. How can I do all this without killing my faculty? I need to help my faculty increase the quality of their courses and their assessments, and I have to do it while saving them time because they can't do any more than what they're doing. How do we maximize resources for providing thorough and accurate documentation for accreditation? Right now, the accreditation process, whether it's domestically or internationally, is a nightmare for most schools, trying to gather all the different feedback from different sources, go through and pick out the different pieces and parts you need, tie it all together, find the data half the time that is missing and that you don't even realize isn't there until you have to put together an accreditation report. It's a really difficult process, and so how can we make that process a little bit better as well? And then lastly, how can I connect my assessments to the mapping of my curriculum in a meaningful way? The assessments are no longer kind of this separate thing, an afterthought. Oh, let's get through our block. Oh, let's get through our course, and I slap together an exam at the end. The assessments really have to be something meaningful. They need to make sure that you've covered the breadth of learning outcomes that you were teaching over the course of that course or block. You need to make sure that it goes to a certain depth to make sure that a certain level of competency is being assessed on that exam, and that it's no longer just a surface level mastery type thing. And making sure that the assessments really are a learning tool for the students in and of themselves, that the students it's not just a summation at the end of a block or a course, but it is something that really tells the students how to move forward and really directs the students on where their education needs to go. So we try to be some of the solution to that, and there's a lot of different things here that we think can help you with that. Our answer is really a comprehensive approach to assessment, both the objective and the subjective side of things, whether it's exams and quizzes and things along those lines, or whether it is essays and presentations, projects, OSCEs and clinical evaluations, clinical performance assessments, things along those lines. We've put together a tool that really can cover both of these things, and in the most meaningful way, it can unite these things so that now when you start to take a look at whether it's your curriculum, your institution, your students, specific course, specific block, whatever level you want to look at this at, when you start to take a look at those things, you can really get a 360-degree view, a view that wasn't really available before, because in one system, you can unite those things and say, let me see how my students are doing when it comes to learning outcome number 3. And it's not just going to be the multiple choice questions about that, and it's not just going to be certain assessments that supposedly had learning outcome number 3 on them. It's going to be all the little pieces and parts from all of the assessments that had anything to do with learning outcome 3 brought together to say, here is how your students are performing on these learning outcomes. Here is how your students are performing on these assessments. And we try to do it in the least intrusive way to your IT infrastructure, to your administrations, to your faculty, in a way that, so we do it in a way that hopefully makes their lives a little bit simpler. I'll show you a little bit about that. There's 3 main buckets that kind of we fall into when we talk about what our software does and how medical schools are using it. We've got over 120 medical schools using our software. That includes both international and U.S. domestic schools. So we've got a really, really large group of medical schools using us, and there's really 3 main things they use us for. One is for the item bank. So we are a place where you would put all of your different items, put them all into our software, set up all your rubrics, whether it's for an OSCE, a presentation, for a clinical performance evaluation, etc. Build all those different things inside of our software. But the key is, inside of that item bank, to tag all of those things with categories. And those categories could be competencies, subject areas, whether it's licensure subject areas, it could be institutional learning outcomes, accreditation standards, Bloom's taxonomy, you name it, you can tag it. It's an unlimited number of category assignments per question. So that's really where kind of the heart of things starts, and all those connections you make here at this level enable a lot of the things going forward. The second bit is our delivery platform. We try to keep that flexible. You can do both Scantron exams, maybe like you've always done, or computer-based testing with laptops, iPads, Surface Pro, Surface Pro 2. You could do all those different things. Now, the key is you're going to get the exact same data, the exact same feedback, and the value of the reporting to both your faculty and your students, regardless of which of our delivery methods you use. And I'll talk to you about how our electronic delivery methods work on the next slide. The last bit, though, is after you've made everything in your item bank, the rubrics, and tagged each row of a rubric with a category, and your questions, and tagged all of those with competencies and categories and learning outcomes, you deliver those exams. That last bit is reporting. And that's where you can instantly get reports back about your student performance. You'll see aggregate level performance of how your whole class or course or block is doing. You'll also be able to take a look at individual students. You'll be able to trace students across your curriculum through longitudinal analysis so that you can see how they're doing on a certain learning outcome or certain topic as it appears in the curriculum. And as more and more things assess that, you'll be able to watch them build towards that, especially in competency-based education, where you need to make sure they're meeting a trajectory that takes them towards meeting minimal competency by the time they graduate. You'll be able to trace their performance in those competencies across times. You'll get detailed reports on item analysis and how to do get the question stats, make decisions about questions and things like that, so you could throw them out or rescore your exams instantly inside the software using a detailed statistical analysis of those things. All of that reporting is available to you, but it also feeds all the way back to the first step in the bank, in that all that data gets tied back to the original items, so that when you're going forward, you've got a historical statistical buildup of how every single question is performed over time, every revision you've ever made to the question, and things along that line, so that you're building up some validity and reliability with your test questions, which will help you with your assessments and help make them more reliable, help make them more predictable. Our actual delivery method for computer-based exams is very different, and this is where we try to be a little bit of a help when it comes to being able to give you the benefits of computer-based testing, but without the infrastructure needs, without any infrastructure problems as a result. Your faculty create questions and exams. They do it inside of our software, but it's web-based, it's in the cloud, it's hosted by us. So you don't have to worry about setting up servers on your campus, getting your IT department to support them, making sure that everything will talk to each other. You don't have to set up VPNs for your faculty to be able to access the software. It's all cloud-based. It's all accessible from wherever they want to be, and that way you don't have to worry about those sorts of things. We take care of the hosting of it. All the data is 100% owned by you, but the actual servers are hosted and maintained by us. Once your faculty create their questions and their exams and they put them in there and they make them ready for students, your students are actually going to download these things ahead of time. So the students are going to download the exam ahead of time. Now, when I first saw this presentation back when I was at Ohio State, I thought this was crazy. I thought, you're putting exams on a student computer in advance. You're the dumbest company that has ever existed. But I promise you it is not true. So what happens is, when you download that student file, it's under a 256-bit military-grade encryption. It's really, really, really secure. But what it enables is that flexibility. It enables you to give exams on computers without having an extreme taxing on your infrastructure. Because the students have downloaded it ahead of time, therefore, when they come into the exam and take it, they are not at all connected to the internet. So if you've got 500 students or 200 students, it doesn't really matter. If they're all sitting in one room, you don't have to worry about them connecting to your wireless, staying connected to your wireless having enough bandwidth to support all these students who are staying connected for hours on end and perhaps watching videos and downloading high-resolution images within their exam. You don't have to worry about that. Everything they need is going to be downloaded in advance. So they come into the room, you give them the password, and when you give them the password, it locks down their computer, and it is not connected to the internet. Now, when we say locks down their computer, many people are familiar with lockdown browsers. We are not a lockdown browser. We aren't a browser at all whatsoever. We don't try to secure someone else's software. We actually have our own software that gets installed on your student's computer, or an app from the App Store if they're on the iPad, and that will enable them to kind of operate inside of this shell, inside of this bubble that's in our software, and they're locked out from everything else. They can't access their hard drive or their flash drives. They can't print screen. They can't Alt-Tab or Control-Delete. They can't, if they were to change their background image on their desktop from a picture of their dog to maybe a cheat sheet, we actually replace that with an ExamSoft logo so that they wouldn't be able to see it during the exam. We've thought of about anything you could possibly think of. We've been giving the bar exams here in the States for years and years and years. We give 43 out of the 50 states use us to give the bar exam, and it's about as high stakes an exam as you can get, and they're completely fine with using our software because they know it's secure. So as your students are taking the exam, they're locked out of other applications, they're locked out of other content, there's no way for them to cheat. But what this allows you to do then is let them take these exams on their own computers, so you don't have to provide a computer lab, you don't have to spend money on setting up a lab and computers and servers and everything to support it, and again, the wireless aspect, they are not connected to the wireless while they're taking this exam. Those things enable you to do computer-based testing and get the benefits from it But again, even if your infrastructure is not quite there to ready to support hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of students using your wireless at once, you could still handle it because you're not going to be using the wireless. Now, the last step, this is going to sound a little counterintuitive to what I just said, but the last step is that they do reconnect to the internet and upload the exam. If it's available there in the room, great. That's wonderful. They can upload the exam right there. If it's not a big deal. You can let them go to McDonald's, Starbucks, the library, an internet cafe. It doesn't matter. You can let them go upload their exam somewhere else, because when they finish the exam, it's no longer editable, it's no longer viewable. You can just let them go and upload it from somewhere else. It's back into that 256-bit encryption, and they won't be able to change their answers. Once it all gets uploaded back to us, then it kicks over to the faculty, where they can see the data, the reports, they can change answers, they can rescore exams, et cetera, et cetera. So a little picture into kind of how our software works to enable you to do some of these things, even in areas where maybe the most ideal scenarios don't exist. Now, as you're integrating technology into your curriculum, there's a lot of different things that can be done. Because of the method I was just showing you of how we kind of do computer-based testing, or really electronic testing, because it can be iPads and Surface Pros and tablets, things like that. You can do a lot of different things with your technology. Lots of schools are doing iPad initiatives, doing things where they test anywhere. The testing no longer has to be tied necessarily to a classroom. You can do testing in anatomy lab practicals, where students are walking around from cadaver to cadaver. You can do your OSCEs that way. You can do at clinical sites, you can have assessment going on. You can have separate accommodation sites for students with disabilities and things like that. The technology allows you to be much, much more flexible and much, much more dynamic with the assessment that you're doing, and that's going to enable you to put this technology in, but like I said from the previous slide, in a way that doesn't require a lot of build-up and a lot of support on your end. It helps you meet the students' expectations, and because you're doing things electronically, you're going to be able to give the students better feedback, because the electronic methodology allows you to gather the data and allows our software to do a bunch of things with it for you, so you don't have to do it all yourself. We used to, when I was at Ohio State, give all of our anatomy lab practicals, and in fact they still do, they haven't stopped, but they give all their anatomy lab practicals on the iPad version of our software. Students walk around in the cadaver lab from cadaver to cadaver, and they have to identify things, or they may maybe watch a video on their iPad and then answer questions based on the cadaver that is in front of them. But that enables them to, really change up how they were doing their anatomy testing. The students get reports, and so that feedback I was talking about to students, the students are able to see how they're performing, and they're able to get a quick and accurate breakdown so that they understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. Students are notoriously bad self-diagnosers. They don't know what's wrong with them. They don't know what's wrong with how they're studying, their education, whatever else. So as you go through and you take a look at their reports, they can take a look real quickly and see, how am I doing? How is the class doing? And, is there an area I really need to work on? And so as you take a look through this report, you'll see the student was doing great when it came to recalling the knowledge and really knowing the facts. But when it got to the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy and really understanding and applying the information, she really started to struggle. Now, this is an example actually from when I was with Ohio State, and we brought the student in and said, hey, what's going on? What are you doing to study? Let's walk it through. And it turns out she was rewriting her notes 25, 30, 35 times before an exam, which is great for remembering every little detail and fact, but it's really not great for trying to understand and apply those things to applicable cases and to the real scenarios in which you're going to have to use that information. So we gave her some cases and some scenarios to work through and said, rewrite your notes 2 or 3 times, then take that information and work it through in these different scenarios so that you can begin to learn how the things connect. And she was really able to improve her performance. The other thing is the actual learning objectives down here, and these are some generic ones, but again, students always misdiagnose themselves. My experience with the students was that when you were to ask them to identify their top 3 strengths and top 3 weaknesses, there was always a top 3 weakness that they thought was a strength, and there was always a top 3 strength that they thought was a weakness. And so they really didn't know where to direct themselves, and this gives them a clear picture. It's not, basic biology, hey, I'm doing great. Drugs and hormones, doing great as well. Nervous system, I'm pretty much right there with the rest of the class, nothing to be concerned. oh, but neural functions, I'm really struggling with that. That's an area I need to focus on. This identifies it for them, takes the guesswork out of it, and really gives them that meaningful feedback. Now, for you as a school, this report, okay, great, it's nice, it's got colors on it, there's some scales and some graphs and whatever else. These look like they take forever to make. They don't. Because you're categorizing your questions and because you're doing all those things in the item bank beforehand and giving the exams through the computer software, you don't have to do anything but hit a button that says release results. And when you hit release results, these reports are automatically generated. They're customized to each individual student and their strengths and weaknesses, and it's posted to that student's portal where they have access to that portal 24/7. So really, you're not doing anything differently than you did before. You're giving the same exams you've always given, but by using a different tool, you're able to instantly provide feedback without any additional work or effort by your faculty members. And so this is something that you can give your students that can really help them be better self-directed learners without having to, go through any extra real steps. Additionally, we have, like I was saying, the rubrics. And the rubrics for the other forms of assessment, like clinical performance evaluations and OSCEs and papers and things like that, you can give student feedback on those as well. And so the student will be able to see the rubric. They'll see each rating that they received. They'll see the explanation. So what did it mean to get good versus excellent on infection control or injections, whatever else it might be. They'll see the comment from the actual faculty member who rated them using the rubric, and they'll be able to see their score and the average score. And as page 2 will have their category breakdown of their performance in the categories that were a part of the rubric. And so that really, really is valuable for your students in that now they can see what they need to work on. Hey, wow, I was really, really poor when it came to the EKG. I need to go see my faculty member and work on this. It gives them feedback. Again, you don't have to do anything other than grade them when you were watching them perform these tasks like you normally would. But as you grade them or mark them, they would then be able to receive these reports at the end. So this is kind of getting into the idea of letting the software do the work. The faculty benefits, and there's some faculty benefits and faculty to student benefits. So for the faculty, just for you, really kind of in your world and what you've got to worry about, seamless scoring and rescoring. You can instantly score exams. You can choose to change your answers, change the answer key, reweight things, throw items out, and instantly rescore them. No more having to scan a bunch of answer sheets and wait for the results or send them off to somewhere else on campus. We've created a really simple interface for question creation as well because we want it to be something easy for you to use. We took our clients about 1.5 years ago and had them send us their faculty who didn't know a mouse from a keyboard and didn't want to know a mouse from a keyboard and said, send us those faculty members who really struggle with technology. Let's put them in our software and get some feedback from them on how we can make this easier and better for them. And that's what the software is today, and that's the interface today. So we've got a simple interface for question creation. The software is tracking your item performance by assessment and total item history. So you could very quickly look back and see how did this item do in every single assessment it's ever been used on over the course of time, and how is this item doing total across all the assessments it's ever done or it's ever been on. How are the stats performing? The software is going to track that stuff automatically for you. So no more saving a bunch of Word documents and Excel documents full of question stats and trying to find them from year to year and reference them back to make sure you're using good items. We built in some question versioning for item refinement. So as you're going through and you make some edits to your questions, the software is going to recognize that you've changed it. It's going to put out a new version of the question. You'll be able to compare the past versions and the current versions so that you can see how the items are performing, and you can see, okay, did the changes I made to this item make it better or worse? And you can look at the stats by version. You compare them side to side to say, what were the changes I even made? It's been a year, I don't remember. For computer and iPad exams, you don't have to print exams, you don't have to score bubble sheets, all those sorts of things. So it's a lot easier, and it's accessible anywhere. No VPN, no being tied to your offices. You can get to this from anywhere, from home, from your office, wherever you want to be. You can work on your assessments. Now, there's some faculty to student benefits because these things are really a benefit to your students, but it's something that is enabled by you, the faculty. The ability to automatically generate and distribute those performance reports that I was just showing, that's really, really nice because now you as a faculty member can say, hey, students, I'm giving you this feedback, but it's not going to take you any more time or cost you anything to do. The faster rescoring and enables your students to get their grades sooner. It gets more timely feedback. And that's both a benefit to you in that A, it's done, but B, for them, they're getting it at a meaningful time. If you wait 2.5 weeks and we're into the next course already before you give me my feedback from the last one, I don't have time to deal with it. Being able to get it really soon, the faster the possible, the more applicable that feedback is going to be to the students. You can distribute scores to students as soon as students finish the exam. So they could hit done and see the score instantly on the screen. And it allows the students to review their exams in a secure setting. So you can allow your students to review their exams, see what they're getting right, see what they're getting wrong, look at why, but you don't have to expose your items and put them at risk to be stolen by the students, because there's a secure mode of our software that will allow you to do that review. Now, for you as the faculty, there's reports too. So much like the reports I was showing before about an individual student, you get reports. Now, we have so many different faculty reports, it's really impossible to show you all of them in one presentation. But each section within this report, whether it's the exam performance or learning outcomes or at-risk students and question performance, there's a bunch of different reports for each of those sections that are just those sections. But this one in particular that I'm showing you overall is the total summary report that we give to the faculty end of exam summary report. You'll get a histogram of your student performance, a KR20 for how reliable your exam scores were. You'll be able to take a look at your low score, high score, and average score. And then you'll see the breakdown of how students did on all the categories you included in the exam. So not just, in this case I have cognitive domains, but that's just my example. It could be anything. It could be competencies, it could be learning outcomes, it could be USMLE subject areas, whatever you want it to be, that's what it would be. But you're going to be able to see the average score of the entire class as well as the high performer and the low performer, so that, let's say this was a list of learning outcomes, you could say, hey, now there's a couple learning outcomes that everybody's doing great on. I'm going to take a day or two away from them, and I'm going to take that day or two of lecture and content time, and I'm going to put it towards these some extra sessions on these other learning outcomes, because the entire class is lagging behind on these outcomes, and that's what we really need to focus on. So for you, the faculty member, it becomes a little bit of a targeted approach to exactly what you need to tweak and fix. You'll take a look at your at-risk students, maybe some people who need some intervention or remediation, and then you'll see some question statistics. Now, this is our most basic question statistic report, but it still has a lot of great stuff on it. The percent correct, how the upper 27% of the class did on the item versus the lower 27%, your discrimination index, point by serial, and a breakdown of how many students chose each answer option. In our more advanced version, you'll actually see discrimination indexes and point by serials for each individual answer choice, as well as the upper and lower 27% by each individual answer choice. So you can quickly take a look and see if there was any problem items, anything you might need to rescore or change, etc. The other aspect of it is the ability to look at things over time. So for you as a faculty member or for the student, you can take a look at performance across multiple assessments. And this is something that is really difficult to do right now. It usually takes a lot of manual tracking or spreadsheets or a lot of work on your part, is to say, in an integrated curriculum especially, how are my students doing in different subject areas? How are my students doing on different cognitive domains? How am I making sure that all these different competencies and the 6 core competencies are being assessed properly and that my students are moving towards achieving them? This enables you to take a look across and say, okay, between these dates and within whatever courses you want, whatever assessments you want, and students as well, there's some more fields that aren't on the screen here, but let me pick my group of students and say, how are these students doing on these categories? So you can see, instead of on 5 or 10 questions in a certain category, you can see across 10 exams and rubrics and 223 items and rubric rows combined, the student has a 75% performance or a 55% performance. And that's meaningful. That's meaningful for the student in that they can plot trends. They really know they have an issue. Whereas getting 2 out of 5 on a quiz doesn't really tell me that I have a problem with the application questions from the quiz. It means I got 2 out of 5 on a quiz. I could have had a bad day. I could have, those could have been the hardest 3 questions on the exam that I missed. It doesn't really hold a lot of meaning. But being able to say, well, it's not 2 out of 5 on a quiz across, 6 exams, 2 rubrics, and 150 questions and 25 rubric rows. Anything that had to do with application, you got a 55% total. You get that 360-degree view of every assessment, every measurement of the student on that particular category, and say, okay, now you really do have a problem. We need to work on this. Same thing for your curriculum. All this data is available for your curriculum as well, to say, what areas of my curriculum are strong, or what areas of my curriculum are struggling. And so this way you know exactly what to target, and you can look at these things, especially in an integrated curriculum where there are topics and threads and things that run through a curriculum. They're no longer a course for biochemistry, no longer a course for pathology. So you don't know anymore exactly how your students are doing in those things because there's not a course just about that. This will be able to let you still teach and test in an integrated fashion, but pull that data apart so that you can take a look at exactly what it is that they're struggling with, so that you would know, okay, even though pathology is 10 questions within every single exam, pathology on the whole within our curriculum is still struggling, etc. When it comes to, that's more the faculty level and the course level. The last level is really the accreditation level. And so once you get to the point where, okay, I've taken a look at my students and I've been working with them and giving them feedback in my courses and so on, I need to, as an institution, take stock and say, am I getting the learning outcome production that I need? Am I making sure my students are achieving these learning outcomes? Am I able to prove that I'm testing these things, that I'm testing them, testing what I taught, and that my students are achieving it? How do I do that? And so you can tag the questions, because it's unlimited, with institutional accreditation standards or competencies. That way you can report just on those things, and you can take a look across your curriculum and do that. You can save some time for your faculty administration by producing these reports really simply. What we try to do is cast as wide a net as possible at the student level, rather than make you go back later and say, okay, I know we've done some stuff, but let's go figure out where we've done it. Hey, faculty, tell me everything about this and that. Tell me everywhere you assess this. Send me all the scores from this system and that system, and oh, you did your OSCEs over here, and oh, you did your exams over here, and oh, you've got student feedback on evaluations here. Send me all those different things so I can try and put it together and prove we did this stuff. Instead, we're trying to catch all that data for you at the student level, and by using us to do all of those things, you have all the data in one place, and it's just a matter of looking at it in a more and more aggregated view. So from how high a view do you want to take a look at this and say, okay, at the student level, the course level, or now the administration institutional level, how is my institution performing? You can do that. The ability when those accrediting bodies come in to say, pick a student. One of my favorite stories in talking to one of our clients was that the kind of gotcha moment, the place where the accrediting bodies really like to stick it to you these days, is to come in and say, Joe Smith, tell me exactly how Joe Smith did on these competencies. Prove to me that Joe Smith learned this and that and the other thing. And they pick somebody out, and now you've got to scramble through and find it. And usually your information's incomplete because it's really difficult to do. Well, because of using our system, this client opened up a binder where they had printed out all the results and looked up Joe Smith and said, here's how Joe Smith is doing on this competency in this exam, this exam, this exam, and this exam. Here's how Joe Smith has done across all of those exams. Here's how he did year 1 compared to year 2. Here's how the course he was in did, and here's how our curriculum as a whole is doing on that competency. In the blank look on the accreditor's face, they're just like, wow, this doesn't happen. People don't have this information. Really enabled them to just move on from that process quickly, and they actually got a really, really nice notation in their report about how good they were at monitoring their students' accomplishment and making sure they were accomplishing learning outcomes. You can also use us for part of your improvement plan. We have comment sections. We allow you to track the effectiveness of plans using our stats, so that you can go through and say, all right, these topic areas are really struggling with, and back in the item bank, you can go through and say, okay, because my students struggled on this, we're going to do X, Y, and Z to address it. And we're going to change based on our performance reports here. We're going to change that we take 2 days away from this topic, add 2 days to that topic, so we can help you track what you're doing along the way. We can help you track the effectiveness of that through those historical stats I was showing you. Because we're logging everything, we can show you, hey, here's what we were doing, here's what we're doing now, here's the stats that bear out this is working or this is not working. We want to help you simplify the process to help your faculty, who are really the ones at the core of having to keep you compliant, but we want them to be able to do that minus the burden. One of the reports that we're actually in the process of developing that it would help with that and is going to be very, very helpful to that is this report right here. Now, all this data is currently available. We're working on a new layout and look to it to help you with that. But what this shows you is how each one of your learning outcomes is performing, how each one of your learning outcomes is being assessed, and its representation within your curriculum. So 1,300 items are assessing learning outcome 3 versus 100 for learning outcome 4. And it might be only quizzes and exams for learning outcome 3, whereas learning outcome 4 has presentations and homework and quizzes and exams, etc. You can go through and look course by course or block by block and say what learning outcomes are represented within that, how are they performing, and what was our goal. So are we meeting our goal? And you can see here, yeah, meeting it, exceeding it. Nope, not really meeting it. We need to do something about that. Then you can take a look at those learning outcomes across those courses to say, okay, are we as a whole, is a curriculum meeting our goals for these learning outcomes? So you can quickly and easily take a look at your learning outcome distribution across courses, learning outcome distribution across assessments, and your learning outcome performance across your entire curriculum. So with that, I'm going to quit babbling at you quite so much, and we'll take a few minutes here to answer some questions. So like Stephanie said, if you have any questions, toss them in the chat window, and I'll be happy to answer those.
Yep, perfect. Thank you so much, Eric. We appreciate that. As Eric said, this is the time. If you have questions for him about anything that he's gone over, anything maybe he didn't go over, please go ahead and type them into the questions area of the GoToWebinar control panel, which should be on the right-hand side of your screen, and I'll go ahead and pose that to him. We're going to go ahead and take a few minutes to do that, and then we'll wrap things up. So it looks like we already have a couple in there for you, Eric. The first one is, how quickly are the data and reports available for student or faculty use?
They're available immediately after an assessment. So there's a couple different options within the software, but you can choose so that the report is automatically released to the student as soon as they finish their exam. So when they finish and they upload that exam back to us, it would automatically trigger the system to release their performance report to them. So it's an instant feedback. You could also choose to wait, take a look at some of the stats, let your faculty make some decisions before releasing it, and then you can release it at any time. Same thing for the faculty. Really, as soon as the students are done with the exam, basically what I would do is my students would finish the exam, I'd walk back to my office, I'd run the item analysis report. Within 90 seconds, I had the full statistical breakdown of every single question, the question stats for each individual one. I would go over that with the faculty member immediately within minutes after the exam is finishing to be able to see, do we need to throw some questions out or accept multiple answers on questions, and the student results were available right away. And if we needed to rescore things based off those stats, though we'd be able to rescore them and get the student results right away. So really the feedback is instantaneous for both the faculty and the students.
Great, perfect. Next question we have is, I am with a smaller program. Is a dedicated IT professional needed on staff to make this process work?
No, absolutely not. And that's really one of the keys behind our program, that you don't have that. We host the servers. There's no kind of burden on the IT department or an IT professional to do that. For the student software in the room, it's a very simple interface, and because it's kind of cut off from the internet, because it's acting independently on the student's computer, there's no real issues as far as having to worry about, oh, your whole class crashed or something like that, and you have to deal with it. That won't happen with our software, because nothing can really affect all your students at once because they're not connected to the internet. To give you an example, next week I'll be going downtown to Columbus, Ohio, where we're going to be giving the bar exam for the state of Ohio. There'll be 1,800 students all in a single room using this software. There'll only be 4 of us there to help students with their computers. And so that 1,800 to 4 ratio, if you get a small class, you don't really need any sort of support. Everything will be fine. The other aspect of that is we will support your students and your faculty. So if something did happen or an individual student had an issue with their computer or something, you could always call us. We could connect to the student's computer and fix it for you, so you don't have any of that support burden.
Great, thank you. Next question is, this process sounds somewhat time-consuming on the front end. How easy is it to get faculty on board on the front end?
That varies from school to school and really what process you're replacing with us. We do some things to try and make it as simple as possible. We have a question importer so that and filters, so that if you've got your questions in a certain format from another system, we can convert those questions from your format to our format and bulk import them so that they get in there all at once. My faculty used to say that it would take them an hour to an hour and a half to do a 125 question exam as far as applying all the categories to them. Now, at the front end, when you're very first starting, you have to go through and do each exam, and we kind of did it on an exam-by-exam basis. We would wait for, whatever exam was coming next, and that's the one we would get ready and move into the system. So by the end of a year, we had everything in the system. The second year, the faculty were head over heels because now all of it was in there, the data was tracked, it was all in one place, the categories were done, and all they had to do was make a couple of tweaks here and there, and it saved them tons of time. So it might be something where the first year you use it, it takes about the same amount of time that what you're currently doing does, but in the second year, you save time, and in both of those years, you're getting a lot more out of it than what you would normally get.
Great, thank you. Next question is, what types of question types does your software support?
We have multiple choice, and that includes single best answer, multiple select, partial credit, any variation of multiple choice you could really think of. We have true, false, fill in the blank, and the fill in the blank will be scored by the system. It does a character match, so if the question was what today is blank, and the answer was Tuesday, the students could type in Tuesday or TUES or TUES period, whatever they would want, and the system would match it against those answers, and it would look at the list of correct answers you provided, and it would auto-score it for you. So fill in the blank that is scored by the system. We also have essay, short answer, and matching as well. So lots of different question types built into the software. I should also note that with those question types, you can do lots of different types of attachments. So you can do image questions with GIFs or JPEGs or PNG files where you got some high resolution images in there. You can do audio files, you can do video files, so that there maybe a student watches the video and answers some questions in the exam, or listens to heart sounds and answers some questions in the exam, as well as PDFs and Word documents, things like that can all be attached to questions as supplemental material to help the students answer the question, or that the students have to evaluate whatever you've attached in order to be able to answer the question.
Great, thanks. Next question is, we are a current client and have been working on a new curriculum and category structure. Are we able to add new categories to questions and still accumulate that data?
Absolutely. So one of the nice things about the way our category structure works is it's retroactive. So you can apply categories to questions now, or you could wait 5 years and do it, and it's going to go backwards in time. So the very first time that question was ever used, the very first assessment that question was ever on, and you'll be able to get the category data from it. And if you've maybe got a category system already in place and you're putting in a new category system, because it's unlimited categories, you could put both of those sets of categories onto a question and be able to compare the data, compare the performance, and so on. So absolutely, you'll be able to get a lot of those things, and it goes backwards as far as you need it to go.
Great, thank you. It looks like that's the last question that I had. However, I do have a statement from another current client, it looks like. I just wanted to share this with you, Eric, because it was funny to me. But I have a client on here saying, oh my goodness, I had no idea it did so much. I have a lot of work ahead of me.
Well, that's great to hear. I will make sure I go yell at somebody for not telling you about this sooner, but we're really, really glad you came, and yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of powerful things in the system. It's just a matter of digging your hands into them and get going with them.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us today, everybody. Thank you so much for beginning your day with us. If you do have more questions for either Eric or for ExamSoft in general, please go ahead and shoot us an email to either info@examsoft.com or to Eric directly at ermie@examsoft.com. Anybody here can answer your question. If you'd like to see a little bit more of the software, we're more than happy to walk you through that and take a look at what your program specifically might be able to do with our software. Once again, as soon as we close out, you will receive a pop-up with a really short survey. It's only 5 questions. It'll take you about 30 seconds. We would really appreciate it if everybody would fill that out if you're able to. It just gives us a little bit more feedback about what everybody's looking for with our presentations, and we want to make sure that we're providing the best content available. So again, everybody have a great Tuesday. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Eric, for your presentation, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.